been able to do my bronze, silver, and gold with Universal Connections, which was a really good opportunity. I learned so many things, and it really was life-changing as well.
Currently a shortlist athlete for the Commonwealth Games for wrestling.
In your opinion, what's your biggest professional achievement? So what was your goal, and how did you measure that success, if you think it's measurable?
I'm feeling a bit better. The first question came from you rather than Abby, because if Abby's involved in wrestling, I'm really quite intimidated now. There's been some things where little kind of moments where I think, yeah, that was significant. One was doing some training way back in Palmont Prison, where we actually worked with some prison officers to train in youth work training. And that was really quite interesting because they had two hats on then. They were the kind of the prison officer, but they were also thinking about it more from a youth work approach. And one of the guys that did that training is, I think, now in charge of all prison officer training in Scotland. So it was quite exciting to see, like, you might have been part of somebody's journey at one point, and then actually they have significant influence. Action on sectarianism and action on prejudice were a couple of things that I was involved in. You always do these things with other colleagues as well. It's never by yourself, but those are quite significant programs and projects that brought together a whole range of organisations, not just youth work, that were kind of working to tackle kind of prejudice and hate crime.
So my first question was just about, so obviously we know that COVID has set back a lot of youth work within local communities. Obviously, personally, I've not finished my gold DV because of it. What plans are in place to support and bring back the youth work that was once in place and now that isn't?
To continue to speak to politicians, so we've developed a youth work manifesto. And just last weekend, I had a few colleagues that were at the Labour Party conference. We'll also be at the other party conferences, some of which are actually happening in person now. And that's a great opportunity to get around and just, remind those leaders of our country how important youth work is, to debate it in Parliament. And three things that are in that: a right for young people to access youth work opportunities. So we look at the UNCRC coming in. What does that mean for children and young people? There is a statutory basis within community learning and development for youth work to take place, but there's still too much picking and choosing of what that means at a local level. We need to have a clear expectation. This is hugely important. It also talks about investment in youth work services at a local level, and it talks about formal recognition of the impact that youth work activities can take across the public policy sector. So these are the kind of three messages that we're taking as part of our manifesto, and we'll be working on a COVID recovery plan for youth work as well, and ultimately a national youth work strategy. Once we have that finalised, then that'll put things back in place where they should be.
How do you think DV will sort of fit it?
So I think the Duke of Edinburgh's award is brilliantly placed actually at the moment, because it's always done something really important in terms of just that kind of wider educational learning opportunities that you get, the kind of the social dynamic that comes through that, and the team building, the teamwork, the attributes that people in the CBI and employers are looking for later in life. So I think one of the things that has come out recently is that there's a lot of interest in education reform. We've looked at things like the exam system, and clearly there's been challenges with that in terms of how that was delivered, the impact on young people, asking questions about should qualifications, are they just about those academic qualifications? And of course, we've known for a long time it's always a much richer tapestry than that. But have we paid enough attention to it? One of the things I've been saying to kind of leaders when we are feeding into the OECD and education reform is it's almost like it's in your peripheral vision, and you need to bring any fuller focus this stuff, because this is the stuff that matters as much, if not more, as those academic kind of qualifications. So I think for me, it's about it's about the DofE working in kind of youth work in schools partnerships, but also in the community, is a really good example of how you can achieve, you can succeed, you can whatever your kind of background, whatever your educational, however school's going for you right now or college, this is an area that you can kind of achieve and work together on that really makes a lasting impact on you.
And so how do you, with your job being in youth work, obviously, how do you actually stay up to date with what young people need, the trends and the issues?
That's a great question, Sandra. And I guess one of the most important things is to assume you know nothing. And I think that comes quite quickly. I remember even as a younger youth worker, 23, 24, thinking, I'm not sure what they're talking about right now. I don't really kind of know. And you can either do that thing where you pretend to know. That doesn't last long, does it? That's kind of, you get found out very quickly. So I think you have to assume you know nothing, and then you have to listen to young people. Another way is research, though. I think it's really important that you can always listen to a group of young people or something that's very current at the time. And yet there's lots of research out there, not just in this country, but across the world, on what's impacting young people. So mental health and well-being for young people at the minute is still huge, was an issue in Scotland before the pandemic, and continues to be of real kind of challenge. Now, how is that being looked at across the world? How are we connecting into studies in Europe around that? And that kind of helps us hear what's the kind of needs for young people right now. And I think also staying in touch with the times more broadly. You know, young people are not a different species. It might feel like a long way away from an old person like me, but you're not. You're like, we're human, we're a family, we're community, and it's not up to young people to solve yesterday's issues or today or tomorrow's issues. It's very much something where we need to listen to young people, but also connect that into social policy and some of the other thinking that's going on out there. And that's what young people are wanting from us to do. They don't want to kind of be pigeonholed in terms of their opinions.
So youth work has been a really big support for both myself and Abby. There's been a lot of support from everyone who's involved in DofE Edinburgh through our journey, and we were wanting to know how can, as you said before, you mentioned this briefly, between traditional academic learning and wider learning. So how can both types of learning outside of the classroom be celebrated?
I think sometimes when you're in a particular period in school, you can think that those exams, whether it's national fives or hires or other vocational, are the be all and end all. And everyone that's probably older than you will tell you, no, it isn't. But at the time it does. You feel that pressure of the significance of it. So I think we need to do a lot to kind of take away the pressure and the impact of that and celebrate all of achievement. So I'd love to see a National Achievement Day when all the press are flooding around, and they're not looking for people in tears or jumping up and down because they got 3 A's in history and art, but they're actually talking about the wonderful things they've actually achieved that year. Maybe they've made a huge impact in working with young people, other young people with special needs, because they were volunteering as part of the DofE award. Wouldn't that be a brilliant story? And wouldn't it be great if we could tell those stories along with the academic ones on a national kind of day of achievement and celebration?
So I'm part of the South Lanarkshire Youth Council, and within that, every young person that's in it has had someone that's inspired them to be there. As you've just said, you got into youth work when you were 23. Was there anybody that inspired you or that made you sort of go for that role and lead your pathway?
Yeah, so I guess my parents were I probably got into it even earlier than that in my head, if you see what I mean, before I did kind of school, university and stuff, because my parents were hugely involved in volunteering and in community-based work and in youth work. My dad was in a national kind of voluntary organisation, youth organisation as well. So they inspired me, I suppose. They didn't kind of push me down that pathway. If anything, it's strange. They inspired me to do that. But I say, if you ask my mum, like most mums, she thought, you're going to be a youth worker. So what are you going to do with that? That's education. Couldn't you be a teacher or be a lawyer or something else? So it's interesting. But looking back, I think they realised that it was a pathway that was good for me to be on. But they inspired me. I mean, I grew up during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, so I was working in a quite a difficult community which had lots of paramilitary groups in it and lots of issues and problems, and they were running youth work in that context. So for some young people that they were working with, it was different life pathways, whether they got involved in youth work or not. It could really, really significantly change their lives. And I think that struck a chord with me. And maybe controversially, there was one or two people that volunteered in youth work that weren't good role models. That maybe goes against the grain, doesn't it? And I thought, that's not the way. I can do that better than this. This is not the way to, maybe promise something and then don't deliver it or something like that. So it's a combination of those things. People that inspired me and right back then, and there's been loads of people who've inspired me since. And it's not a. I think the thing about, we often use this term role models and mentors, but they come in all ages. They come from people that are younger than you and older and sideways peers as well, don't they? It's not kind of, oh, I'm looking up to this this person. Maybe started when I had admiration for my parents, but there's been lots of other people who have inspired me and still inspire me today.